Good evening, and welcome to the Millennium stage. I am pleased to present to you the Carol Ringers and the Peace Ringers.
Good evening, I'm Nancy Capel, and we're from St. Matthew's United Methodist Church in Annandale, Virginia. And the first piece we played was Pat-a-Pan, and I'd like to introduce the second piece. It's Veni, Emmanuel. O Come, Emmanuel is a Christian hymn for Advent and Christmas. An antiphon is a devotional musical response to a reading or singing scriptures, kind of like a call and response. So this piece is made up of many antiphons. It's a series, the tune and the text were composed in 15th century. This piece utilizes several handbell techniques. Handbell ringers are tapping the suspended bells, and I wonder if we could get a few people up here on the top to tap your suspended bells. And you're supposed to do it randomly, like the little tinkling of bells, thank you. And does somebody have a stick to wrap around a bell? Okay, in the middle there, these girls. That's a lovely humming sound that you will hear at the end of the piece, and probably handbell techniques that many of you haven't seen before. Handbell ringers are tapping and suspending, and a short dowel rod that you saw circling the bell, it's black on one side to give a better grip for the hand. At first, I thought and they thought we'd use the black around the bell, but it didn't work too well, so we traded it, and then I looked it up, and sure enough, we're supposed to use the wooden part next to the bell. Kathy Mucklebust is the arranger, and she will be one of our directors at our Handbell Festival conference that we're attending at the University of Hartford next June. And Kathy has done a lot of arranging. I'm very excited for the kids to have her as a director. So here is Veni, Emmanuel. The Little Drummer Boy is a very popular Christmas song written by the American classical music composer and teacher Catherine Davis in 1941. It was first recorded in 1951 by the Trapp Family Singers of The Sound of Music. I think most of us know that they came from Europe and they settled in Vermont, and so they recorded it for the first time. In the lyrics, the singer relates how, as a poor young boy, he was summoned by the Magi to the Nativity of Jesus. Without a gift for the infant, the little drummer boy played his drum with Jesus' mother Mary's approval, recalling, "I played my drum best for him, and he smiled at me." And I just want to tell you that these ringers are all freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I'll let you raise your hand. Oh, you can't see them anyway, so it's okay. And they go to several different high schools in Fairfax County, but all come to the same church. So we'd like now to play The Little Drummer Boy. We have 6 handbell choirs at our church. 2 of them you'll hear this evening. The peace ringers and the carol ringers are at the most advanced that we have in the church, and then we have one other adult choir, 1 other youth choir, and 2 children's choirs. So we start in the 3rd grade and work up to seniors and adults. Flashback to 1944. Music teacher Donald Gardner was filling in for his wife, also a music teacher, in a second grade classroom in Smithtown, New York. When the classroom teacher asked each student to stand up and say what they wanted for Christmas, Gardner noticed that the children were lisping. As soon as they grinned, he realized why. 16 of the 22 children were missing one or more of their front teeth. Inspired by the cute smiles, Gardner went home that night and wrote a song for the school's Christmas pageant. He later recalled it took about a half an hour to put the words and music on paper. That's a very short time to do that. Gardner thought the song was god-awful and said it won't even sell 100 copies. It actually sold 2 million copies in 8 weeks. So we'd like to present for you our unusual arrangement by Matthew Prinz of All I Want for Christmas Is My Two Front Teeth. We have something special to show you that didn't show up at everybody's place. That was Ryan Bailey. He's a senior. And I told him the other day when he was performing so well, I said, you know what, you wouldn't have done that 4 years ago as an 8th grader or freshman. But they get a lot more confident as they go through high school. Leroy Anderson, his wife Eleanor, and their young daughter Jane came to Woodbury, Connecticut in 1946 to spend the summer in a cottage on Painter Hill Road. During a July heat wave, Leroy was digging trenches to find some old pipes coming from a spring. And in a break that he took from the hot weather, he began composing several tunes, including Sleigh Ride. Since the cottage was not winterized with heat, the Anderson family could not stay for the following winter. In the winter of 1946-47, the family had moved to Brooklyn during the snowiest winters on record. Anderson completed Sleigh Ride and had its premiere with Arthur Fiedler conducting the Boston Pops Orchestra. Martha Lynn Thompson is arranger of our Sleigh Ride. These guys do a great job. It just takes a long time to pick up and put down the bigger bells. The Ukrainian bell carol is probably one of the most famous of Christmas pieces and well-liked. It can be played in church, it can be played in community, and actually it was originally written for the New Year, not for Christmas. The tune, Shredrik, was composed by a Ukrainian composer and music teacher, Mykola Leonovich, in 1916. The title of the song means "The Little Swallow" in English. It is about a sparrow that flies into a home and sings to the family about the bountiful year that awaits them. Nothing about Christmas. Peter Wilhowsky was a popular American composer and choral conductor when he heard this tune. He decided to write lyrics in English to accompany the song's melody in 1936. Nick Hansen, who goes to our church, widely known in the handbell world in the U.S., has artfully arranged Ukrainian Carol of the Bells. Nick teaches at the Potomac School in McLean. His wife Genevieve is my assistant at St. Matthew's, and their sons are a part of our music program at St. Matthew's. So we're going to close this portion of the program with by the Carol Ringers with the Ukrainian Bell Carol. I told them they have to find it no matter what. When the kids in third grade start learning about how to do handbells, I have a chart that is about this size. It sits on a stand, and the letters on the bells are A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Thank goodness we don't have 26 letters to learn. But they play, the red letters are at the top, and the black letters are in blocks with the chords underneath, and even you could play in about 10 minutes, but we're not going to do that this time. But we'd like now to play. Are you missing something? Do you have it?
Yeah.
Everything?
Yes.
Do you need a mallet? Okay, because one fell off over here, I think. You have everything you need? I want to single out a special person today. She's spending her birthday at the Kennedy Center ringing bells instead of whatever a teenager might do on their birthday. So Catherine, raise your hand, and let's all sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Catherine. Happy birthday to you. A light person, could you give us a little light to see the new people are coming and they need to see their music? While we're waiting for this group to do their first piece, I'm wondering if you have any questions about handbells that you'd like to ask. Nobody has any questions about handbells? Yes. The handbells began in England in the 1840s. The handbells became popular in England. They used the tower bells first, and the tower bells were our biggest bell. The singing sticks and can make a lot of noise. Anyway, the tower bells were rung in the big towers, with the biggest bell being the smallest bell in a tower. We have two towers here in Washington, D.C., one at the Post Office Pavilion and one at the National Cathedral. And I forget how many they have, I think 9 or 11 handbells. It's usually an uneven number. And they ring changes on those handbells. So I don't know, I would imagine that tomorrow at the National Cathedral, for President Bush's funeral, there will be you'll hear bells, and those are rung by people pulling ropes from the big tower at the top of the Washington Cathedral. Several years ago, I knew one of those ringers, and a friend of mine and I were invited for New Year's Eve to see them ring. First, at 10 o'clock, it was traditional New Year's Eve to ring. They would wrap the bells so that you could hardly hear them. You could just hear a little bit. And they did that at 10 o'clock. And then at 12, for at least a half an hour, they would ring certain changes. I don't know very much about it, except it's mathematical, and I could never do it. They remember where their bell comes in all these changes for up to 3 hours. And if they actually rang the longest one ever written, they would be playing for a week. I can't imagine, but maybe they had several teams come in and somebody slept a while and came back. We'd like to play A Joyful Christmas Celebration. Savior of the Nations Come is the next piece we'd like to play, and it's also called an Advent hymn par excellence. It was originally written in Latin by St. Ambrose in 339. That's a long time ago. Martin Luther later translated this hymn to German. When singing this hymn, we confess that Jesus is the light of lights, conceived by God and born of the Virgin Mary. We use a bell tree. You'll see that directly back. And those are bells hung with their each handle in between the other one. And then we also have the chime wall in the back. You've seen the smaller chimes, and we did use the chime wall for a couple of the carol ringers pieces, but Nathan will be using the chime wall and the bell tree. Our large chimes on 2 racks, if you can see them back there. You see them? Those are big chimes of the ones we have tiny ones up here. Let's hold one of those up, yes. So we go a long range. We have 7 octaves of chimes and 7 octaves of handbells. So we would like to play Savior of the Nations Come. We're going to play a carol called We Three Kings. And this, of course, centers around the biblical magi who visited Jesus as a child in a house sometime after his nativity. They gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The number 3 stems from the fact that 3 gifts were given. At the time he was writing We Three Kings in 1857, John Hopkins was serving as the rector of Christ Episcopal Church in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And it's known that he had quite a few family members that wanted to be in this pageant. So this is one of the songs he wrote, but he wrote many other songs so that everybody could have a small part, at least everybody in his family, which was evidently huge. It was written, it was highly unusual for one person to write both the music and text to a carol, which I didn't realize until I read this, looked this up a couple of years ago and found that out. So it isn't that, it's that 2 people are listed in the hymn book for almost every carol. One is for the music and one is for the text. We Three Kings was the first Christmas carol originating in the U.S., and it was one of the most successful of modern composed carols. I'd like to continue on with your question that when we got to the 1840s, people were doing the tower bells, and then they began to do handbells because somebody developed those. It was very cold up in the towers, and also the community where the tower bells were got really tired of hearing everybody practice. They didn't have a community association that said you can only practice, well, at the post office pavilion they can only practice on Tuesday, and on Thursday they can practice at the National Cathedral. So community groups would get very tired of hearing that, and they didn't have a way, they didn't really have shutters to cut out the sound anyway. So you can imagine if you were in a choir and you practiced, and every time you practiced, the whole town would hear you practice. So someone thought of doing a smaller bell, and then they kept them on a shelf. Usually these rooms are circular because the bells are around up in the tower, and then behind them would be the handbell that they could practice with. And since this is a public place and not a church, I can tell you they began practicing these bells. They'd throw them in a suitcase or in a basket and take them to a local pub and have a good time with the bells more than once a week. So that's how bells then came to the United States by families who brought smaller sets of bells. And it was in the 1920s that a Dr. Shercliffe from Boston was in England, and he decided to bring his daughter, who was grown and had children, a set of bells. It was 2 octaves of bells. So if somebody can hold up the G4, G4, and G6. So the bells in between, that's 2 octaves of bells. And she had neighbors practice with her and her children, and they were on the floor using the carpet, and they did a lot of Christmas carols, so that she told everybody in the Beacon Hill section of Boston, starting sometime in the 1920s, if you have your light on Christmas Eve, we'll come and ring and sing Christmas carols. I know that to be true. Some of the stories, I wonder, like I can't imagine anybody remembering what happened in 339. That's out of the question. But I talked to someone who was in that original handbell choir. In the 60s, I talked with her, and she had great stories to tell about ringing bells with Margaret Shercliffe. So I know that to be true. So we'd like now to play We Three Kings. In 1955, the American Guild of English Handbell Ringers was formed because people were getting together just starting bells and nobody had any music. All the directors had to write their own. So that grew from, 1954. From 1954 until now, they started with about 25 directors, and now we have thousands. Each director represents a bell program, or most of them do. So at our church, Tammy, raise your hand. Tammy and I are the directors of the bell choirs, and so my membership represents all of those people. There's about 85 or 90 people in that. So a lot of those memberships in the American Guild of English Handbell Ringers are like that. Several years ago, they started calling it the Handbell Musicians of America. So we still like to call it the Guild, even though it's not the Guild, but that's what we refer to. So in this area, we have lots of bell choirs. Is there anyone in the audience who has never seen a bell choir? Okay, we're glad you came tonight, so now you've seen a bell choir. And we got our bells in 1973, and we bought 2 octaves. Someone gave the money for that, and then a few years later, the minister called me and said, I'm at a ministers' meeting in Richmond, and the Schulmerich Company, which was the company we went with for the bells, the Schulmerich Company is having a sale at the Methodist Ministers Association, and so would you like the 4th octave? 3rd and 4th octave. And I said, well, yes, I would, but I didn't ask for them. And he said, well, I won't tell anybody that. I'll just tell that we found a sale. And he was really good about finding sales. And so he came home the next week with the 3rd and 4th octave, got up in church and said, we need $15,000. And it came in. So he was very good. We don't usually run a church like that. We put it in a budget. But this particular minister, he was good at saying, we need a furnace, we're going to get cold, and the money came in. Don't know how he did it. Does anyone have any more questions about bells, about us? All right, then we'd like to play Jingle Bells. And Jingle Bells was first published in 1857. It was written by James Lord Pierpont to be sung on Thanksgiving, not Christmas. Look at all the songs I've said. I think this is the 3rd one I've said really didn't start out as a Christmas song. There is some question as to where it was written, Massachusetts or Georgia. Medford, Massachusetts, where sleigh races were popular, claims it as the birthplace of the song. There's a plaque at 19 High Street in Medford, the site of a former tavern where Pierpont was said to have penned the ditty in 1850. The original title of the song was One Horse Open Sleigh, but that changed to Jingle Bells when it was reprinted in 1859. Astronauts Wally Schirra and Thomas Stafford, orbiting the Earth on Gemini 6 on December 16, 1965, made Jingle Bells the first song heard from space. They played it on the harmonica with accompanying bells. The harmonicas used in this broadcast are now in the Smithsonian. I've never seen them, but the next time I go, I'm going to look for these harmonicas. I want to thank you for coming this evening. We really enjoyed playing for you. And if you have more questions, I'm going to come out in the audience. We also will have our new Christmas CD available behind the sound and light area at a table. And Maggie Workman, would you raise your hand, Maggie? Way over here. She's short, like me. She will be selling our album for $12. We made the CD after Christmas last year. So it has several things that we played tonight. It has Sleigh Ride, it has Carol of the Bells, it has, it doesn't have Savior of the Nations Come. It has Little Drummer Boy. Tell me some others. Coventry Carol. Speak up, I can't hear you. Pat-a-Pan, the first song we played. Anyway, it's a fantastic CD. I'm very proud of it. We made it over a period of 2 days at a retreat. The kids, actually the high school kids, were the quickest. They did all their songs in about 2 hours. The Peace Ringers and I took a long time making our CD, but it's good. Because you have to stop. We don't have an audience, and you're just in a room, and you have to stop every time you make a mistake. The very first Christmas CD we made with this group, I would do take 2, take 3, take 4. We just did the first page until it was take 48. That was very tiring. But one of the ringers said, why don't I go back and get that a second bell for that person's part who's not getting it. So she did, and why we didn't think of that 48 times earlier, I don't know. But thank you for coming, and we'd like to close with Jingle Bells.
Tom, what are you doing?
The slide whistle.
This is Jingle Bells.
Oh, not Silent Night?
No, no, is there a slide whistle in Jingle Bells? No, no, it's a traditional classic. Everybody knows it, right? You wouldn't want to do something stupid or silly or unexpected. You don't mess with Jingle Bells, all right?
Where did I get these ringers?